Namaskar and thank you for joining us here on the Economic Brief, the program that tracks key stories from the worlds of business, finance and economy and contextualizes them from local as well as global points of view. On the program today, JPMorgan sees huge long-term potential in India's economy and they're going to increase their presence in India by 30%. Pakistan's austerity measures find IMF backing for the moment, but does its economy have the market as well as the appetite for economic revival? How does the military-industrial complex of Israel and Iran stack up amid rising West Asia tensions? And we leave you with an assortment of the top business stories of the week. But first up, let's listen to Dr. Lawrence Summers, the former U.S. Treasury Secretary, also former World Bank Chief Economist, and currently the President Emeritus at Harvard University. He's expressing his long-term optimism about India's economic growth. Here, he's talking about the potential benefits of India's youthful population.
I think that they're alive and launching on their careers at an extraordinarily exciting time. If India is able to grow at 7% a year for the next 5 decades, that would be an extraordinary thing in which the economy would grow more than 30 times over people's lifespans. And at the end of it, India would be very substantially richer than my country is today. And that would be a stunning achievement for a nation and bring stunning benefits to all its people.
So let's take a look now at what JPMorgan says about India and why it is optimistic about India. We look at, it's been talked about for some time now, the China Plus One strategy. And India, of course, is one of the key countries to gain from this China Plus One strategy. As we can see, emphasis on the China Plus One strategy. And this strategy it basically involves the rest of the world breaking away, moving out of China, diversifying, decoupling from China. And who is to get that advantage? India. India has the strengths, it has the ability, it has the potential to take advantage of this situation, and it is doing so. And as a result of that, India is now benefiting from the China Plus One strategy. India already is amongst the top markets in Asia, and India is only going to grow better and better as a result of that. We can see JPMorgan's India operations themselves. They are investing heavily in India. They're coming out in a big way. 30% they're going to grow in India themselves. JPMorgan is the world's largest bank. And India's growth is very broad-based, is what they say, across all sorts of sectors. We need to understand that growth really depends on being broad-based. I mean, if all the sectors work together, that's how growth can, percolate down and can become totally inclusive. And as a result of that, manufacturing can benefit and investments can come in, and India can take those benefits of the China Plus One strategy and move forward. India needs, of course, to strengthen its manufacturing, which it is doing, but it also needs to increase scale. It needs to increase and grow in scale. We are joined by Dr. Gautam Sen, who taught at the London School of Economics for over 2 decades, and he now joins us. He's an expert on international economics. Thank you, sir, for being with us. And this is regarding the way the whole world is decoupling, in a sense, from China. It has been happening, the China Plus One strategy, for some time. But how seriously is the world economy taking this decoupling from China?
What the world is finding out is that decoupling is not so easy and is quite painful. The degree of interdependence between China, Europe, Germany, the United States is very significant, and I cannot see how they can decouple in the medium term in a very significant way. China's exports have grown very sharply this month. So decoupling is much more difficult than people imagine. And I think we are finding that to be true in India as well.
Also, Dr. Sen, does India actually have the comparative advantage to become a major manufacturing hub? manpower, technology, capital, all combined?
We are on the cusp. Manufacturing and production has risen very sharply. If I remember correctly, it is now over $455 billion. And this, I think, surprised some people abroad. But you see, India is reaping the benefits of the huge structural changes and infrastructure investment, everything from communications and roads to digitization. All of these are coming together. The question is, can we persist with this? For this, India needs prolonged political stability, because we have at least another decade to go, and we have some significant unresolved problems. For example, on the question of labor reform, on the issue of land acquisition, and vocational training. These to me are the three areas in which India needs to advance very quickly. JPMorgan also identifies a critical problem in comparison to China that India has faced for a very long time. We are lacking in scale. And this is something which cannot be overcome quickly overnight. But I think, everything is coming together. It is entirely possible. And I see that even in vocational training, the government is investing, making a lot of efforts, and our infrastructure transformation continues apace. I am guardedly optimistic, but there are external factors which we must bear in mind, which are the huge instability around the world, which I think is now going to raise oil prices. We have been getting a $15 to $20 discount buying of late from Venezuela, very poor quality crude, which only Jamnagar of Reliance can refine.
Okay.
Now, all of this is coming, but we have to worry about these issues. For example, the oil is taking 42 days in this long circuitous journey because it cannot come from the Gulf because of the Houthi missile attacks. So all of these things are a problem. But we also have not understood fully in India the economic warfare against Russia, which everybody has understood, is also occurring against India. The United States has only given Reliance permission to buy Venezuelan oil. This was previously prohibited. We need many more agreements to buy Venezuelan oil, and I'm afraid issues like the foreign hand in the farmers' dispute, which has really hindered India, remain very much alive. I'm also worrying about the way there are attacks on major industrialists in India. Some of these industrialists may be tempted to decamp and
So these are some of the external factors that you've mentioned. But what is required otherwise from within to improve scale in India? You did mention that infrastructure is being built at a rapid pace. The government is putting a lot of money in capital expenditure. And if we look at China's model, China of course has very good logistics, and as a result of that they took over a large chunk of the supply chains across the world. But obviously, India has the similar advantages in terms of cost advantages with labor at the current time.
But we lack quantity of skilled labor. We are not really anywhere near China or Vietnam. What we have achieved, that our ports are able to now unload cargo very quickly, I think within a day and a half, which is quite a record compared to even the rest of the world. But our logistical costs were, I think, in the region of 16%, whereas China's was nearer 11 or 10. So we are working on this very hard to reduce our logistic costs. Labor costs alone don't matter. Skill is very important, and this is where we have to make a lot of effort. And also I keep repeating, we must have labor reform, whereby what you have is stability in employment, but not stability in a single workplace. People have to stop worrying about being stable in a single place and worry about employment stability, so that there can be reallocation and reorganization. All of these things are very politicized in India, with political parties having a say in how policy is formulated and implemented.
Let's now move on to our next story. Our next story is about Pakistan. And we'll talk about Pakistan, the IMF bailout of $7 billion in Pakistan for Pakistan. It comes with many conditions that have forced the Pakistani government to take various measures. Let's take a look at this story about Pakistan now. Pakistan is experiencing what its authorities term as transitional pain, following the International Monetary Fund's approval of a $7 billion bailout to support its struggling economy. In response, the cash-strapped nation has eliminated 150,000 government jobs, shut down 6 ministries and merged 2 others as of the end of September.
We have to broaden the tax net. We have to get rid of loss-making entities. We have to go for the privatization. We have to control our public spending.
Pakistan's economy has been dependent on IMF bailouts and loans from friendly countries to service its huge debt, which swallows up half of its annual revenues. Pakistan, in July, agreed to its 24th IMF payout since 1958, in exchange for unpopular reforms, including cutting back on past subsidies and widening its chronically low tax base. Pakistan is negotiating a $12 billion loan reprofiling from bilateral lenders, $5 billion from Saudi Arabia, $4 billion from China and $3 billion from the UAE for a 3 to 5 year period.
I would say what they have done is what a brother does for a brother and friend for a friend. These brotherly and friendly countries have helped us previously as well as this time. They have repeated the history by helping Pakistan wholly.
About 40% of Pakistan's debt is owed to external creditors in foreign currencies. Its biggest single creditor is China and Chinese commercial banks at just under $30 billion, followed by the World Bank at more than $20 billion. In a nation of more than 240 million people, where most jobs are in the informal sector, only 5.2 million people filed income tax returns in 2022. In July, Pakistan resorted to unusual methods to increase its tax revenues, blocking 210,000 SIM cards until taxes were paid.
We are empowered under the income tax ordinance that anyone who is supposed to file a return and he or she doesn't file the return, we can block his or her SIM.
This action didn't go down too well with the public, who believe their politicians are the biggest tax evaders who are not held accountable.
Do the MPs and ministers pay taxes? Is anyone taking away their SIMs?
While the Pakistan stock market was enthused by the latest IMF bailout, the common man is a little more skeptical.
This IMF loan will resolve our balance of payment crisis temporarily, but until when it will go on?
The latest economic crisis has been the most prolonged in Pakistan's history and has the highest ever inflation, pushing the country to the brink of a sovereign default last summer before another IMF bailout. The Economic Brief, DD India. Now we are talking about Pakistan and the IMF bailout and the compromises that Pakistan has to go through. Is Pakistan, in your opinion, in a debt trap, sir?
Their structural problems remain unchanged. They will gain some temporary relief with the $7 billion, but Pakistan only has 2 months of foreign exchange, for 2 months of exports, enough foreign exchange to cover 2 months. Many of the recommendations of the IMF will be very painful for ordinary people, and this will imply some degree of political conflict. So the country is not out of the woods by any means at all.
Dr. Sen, can the Pakistan economy be liberated from the political instability and the military interference? Because, the economy seems to be held hostage in a sense.
I have written about this at length, and my view is that the underlying political problems are very difficult to address. It requires a fundamental societal change in which you have genuine democracy and accountability, which means the RB's role has to go into the background completely. And I don't see, given Pakistan's history, how that is feasible.
Also, is there enough entrepreneurial zeal in Pakistan itself? Can Pakistan hope one day to become like the UAE or even Malaysia or Indonesia?
Some entrepreneurial zeal is always present in most societies, but in Pakistan it's been dormant for a very long time, and it has been a very politicized economy with an absolutely extraordinary amount of corruption, with the senior officers usurping land, investing in real estate abroad. So this is very difficult to get out of, because these are the people who remain in charge. And how do you change the situation and take them away from power? But this, I think, is very difficult. But let me add something which I'm reading about a great deal in the last few days. Pakistan is poised to become the fourth largest possessor of oil reserves.
So
It is possible they will auction the rights and gain significant foreign reserves.
Well, that's good news for Pakistan, but looking at how indebted they are to China already, $30 billion owed to China, China investing in the Pakistan Economic Corridor, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and there is also a lot of money that Pakistan is owed to Saudi Arabia. Do you think that those countries will take advantage of what you're talking about?
You see, the Chinese gave out these loans, and the loans were very heavily padded to satisfy domestic Pakistani claimants. So these loans are very expensive. So this is a problem for which they need actually very significant resources, and I don't see how Pakistan will generate the export surplus to service these loans, repay these loans. Pakistan's bonds are now priced at 12.43%, which is the third highest in the world after Russia and Kazakhstan.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Gautam Sen. Thank you for joining us from London and enlightening us on a number of issues about the global economy. Thank you, sir. Well, it's not just oil prices that are affected by rising tensions in West Asia. Let's take a look at the defense industrial base of both Israel and Iran. Israel's military expenditure was approximately $27.5 billion in 2023, and Iran's was around $10.3 billion. So both countries are building capabilities for asymmetric warfare. Anu Kaushik reports.
Fears of a full-blown conflict in West Asia reached an all-time high as Iran launched 200 ballistic missiles towards Israel. The two have been arch rivals, with their enmity going back to decades. Unsurprisingly, they have also been spending significantly on defense. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, after the October 7th Hamas attack, Israel's defense budget in 2023 rose by 24% to over $27 billion, while Iran's spending on military stood at $10.3 billion. Israel also received nearly $4 billion in military aid from US in 2023. In the same year, defense budget accounted for 5.3% of Israel's GDP, while for Iran, the share stood at 2.1%. Military expenditure accounted for 2.3% of the global GDP. Iran's economy is mainly dependent on energy imports and agriculture, while Israel has emerged as a regional tech and industrial manufacturing hub. Iran's economy has also been hit hard by Western sanctions over its nuclear program. According to the most recent data, the country's nominal GDP stood at $388 billion, while for Israel it was $509 billion. But military manpower often depends on the total population. Israel has nearly 170,000 active personnel, while Iran has over 600,000 active personnel. Both nations also have reservists and paramilitaries. A prolonged conflict takes a toll on the economy as resources are diverted to the military. With visitors avoiding West Asia as tensions escalate, sectors like aviation and tourism have already been hit. Now the growing involvement of Iran has surged oil prices. Anu Kaushik for the Economic Brief, DD India.
So let's conclude the economic brief today with the top stories from the business world. And thank you for watching. Namaskar.
Adani Group will supply clean energy to power Google's cloud services and operations in India. The group will supply energy from a new solar-wind hybrid project located at its 30-gigawatt Khavda Renewable Energy Park in the western state of Gujarat. According to an estimate by the All India Traders Confederation, the upcoming festive season is expected to generate a business of over $6 billion nationwide. The celebrations include Navratri, Ram Leela, Garba, and Dandiya. The creator of ChatGPT OpenAI raised $6.6 billion from investors on Thursday, which could value the company at $157 billion and cement its position as one of the most valuable private companies in the world. American space agency NASA partnered with Nokia to set up a cellular network on the moon to help lay the building blocks for long-term human presence on other planets. The US National Transportation Safety Board reported on Monday that over 40 foreign operators of Boeing 737s may be using planes with potentially unsafe rudder components. California Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed a controversial artificial intelligence safety bill on Sunday after tech industry objections, which claimed it could drive AI companies out of the state and smother innovation. The East Coast and Gulf Coast dock workers of the US began their first large-scale strike in nearly 50 years on Tuesday, halting the flow of about half of the country's ocean shipping after negotiations for a new labor contract broke down over wages. The British government said that banks will have the power to pause payments for up to 4 days to give them more time to investigate fraud. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Russia will continue to develop its own liquefied natural gas technologies and will boost the infrastructure of the Northern Sea route. German Economy Minister Robert Habeck said that the European Commission should be open to a political solution ahead of an EU vote on whether to impose tariffs on China-made electric cars.